When you watch a movie like, say, Lord of the Rings, you don't really see the character's full journey from the Shire to Mordor. You see the major events and the locations they take place in, but you're only really shown glimpses of how they get to each location. Brief moments that subtly give you all of the information needed. Has it been a while since we last saw them? Have they travelled far? What sorts of places have they been through? This is more than fine. These movies are incredible, and if we had to watch the characters walking everywhere, then each movie would be several weeks long. But it does make you question what else we could have seen, even before you factor into account the fact that a lot of material was cut when adapting these movies from the original books. But even if these movies were entirely original, that question would still be pretty viable. However, this is one of the greatest strengths of video games. You can quite perfectly, quite comfortably fit gameplay into all of those in-between segments, things that wouldn't normally be important to the plot, can make for such an important part of the game. This is mainly, but not exclusively, showcased in RPGs and open worlds. You get to see and experience how every town, every cave, every lake, every tree all fits together in one cohesive world. Not just connected by a series of scenes from a fixed perspective, but by the explorable time and space between those scenes. The phrase, "see that mountain? You can go there," gets joked about a lot, but in 2011 when Todd Howard said it to promote Skyrim, it was kind of a big deal. I've said before that creating a good open world is an impressive feat on technical and design fronts, but a game doesn't need to be one single open space to feel connected and cohesive. Most fully explorable game worlds take the shape of just a single rectangular space, and this isn't bad. But it does begin to feel a bit homogeneous, especially with how many games have been doing it over the past decade. But there's one video game that I adore over pretty much every other video game, and one of the largest reasons for that is because it takes the idea of a large explorable world to such a creative level. Xenoblade. I fucking love Xenoblade, so much so that my first tattoo is of the Monado, the sword which the entire game's story revolves around, and that story takes place entirely in the area you see here. Those of you watching who have played Xenoblade Chronicles know the gist, but for those who don't, the premise is that two colossal beings, the Bionis and the Mechonis, fought to their mutual deaths. Over time, sentient life began to grow and evolve on their bodies, forming diverse ecosystems and societies, so the entire game world is on these two giants. To give you a better idea of the scale on display here, let's take a look at Colony 9, the typical JRPG starter village of Xenoblade Chronicles. It rests on a relatively small plateau atop a lake in a relatively enclosed valley. But the thing with this entire valley around Colony 9 is that it's just this tiny part of the Bionis. Just walking around the area adds so much to the sense of scale. The valley feels so massive and open, but the problem with actually being here is that it feels disconnected from everything else in the world. You can't really see anywhere else from here because the walls of the valley are so high, and blocking your view above is the upper half of the leg. It's difficult to really get a sense of scale until you start moving up the leg, eventually passing the knee. From here, not only can you see the opposing titan way off in the distance, its sword acting as a piercing bridge between the two worlds, but you also get a sense of the true scale of the towering colossus that encompasses all of the characters' lives. Day, night, sun or storm, its presence is always looming. In a conventionally designed open world, you'll come across a vista that looks somewhat like this, and you'll be teased with a world of almost infinite possibilities. At least it seems that way. You'll see hills, mountains, forests, deserts, whatever. But Xenoblade doesn't do that. It doesn't tease you with the possibilities of all the different places you can explore. It teases you with something else. You're haunted by a constant reminder of just how small you are, whilst also making you wonder what the rest of the world will look like. But it's not just the scale of these creatures that allows the world to take shape, but also the shape and the posture of them. If we zoom out, we can see that the Bionis is lurching forward with its right leg in front, causing the upper leg to mostly be horizontal, and this results in a long, mostly flat surface that makes for the perfect location to place wide open plains of grass, populated with wildlife, man-made landmarks, trees, rock formations, lakes, and it's all surrounded by strangely biological looking stone arches that hang above, with a steep cliff face at the far end where the torso begins. This is probably the area that most people think of when they think of Xenoblade, and yeah, it's easy to see why. It's a very distinct take on the sort of natural green plains biome that we see in the early areas of a lot of JRPGs. And it was in Smash Brothers. Let's look at somewhere a bit different next. Let's take a look at Valak Mountain. Now you might be wondering, how did they even fit a mountain on a giant? Surely the giant isn't that giant, right? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. The mountain is just the giant's right arm. When it holds the sword that's being driven into its sternum, it makes for quite a steep slope, and that just made for the perfect natural fit for what we think of as a mountain. Now, we can spend ages arguing over whether or not snow would have actually formed here, whether or not the clouds or whatever are scientifically accurate, but does that really matter when the area is this cool? And you can see what this area is like as early as the Bionis leg. You look up at the arm and you can see the snow and the heavy clouds forming around it. But that's not all. Look off towards the Mechonis and you'll see its severed hand laying in the ocean as nature slowly reclaims it. Look down towards the right leg and you'll see Colony 9 nestled comfortably inside. The scale and how creatively it's used is genuinely breathtaking to me. That's not to say it's all this good. Whenever you're almost anywhere on the Bionis back, it's very easy to lose that sense of perspective and scale. For the most part, Satol Marsh, located around the Bionis waist, feels very disconnected from everywhere else in the game, because you can't really see any other locations. It being so gloomy makes sense. It's on the side of the Bionis that's blocked by the sun, but I wish something more was done to remind you exactly what you're standing on. Machna Forest, the game's jungle area on the Bionis back, has a similar issue, albeit to a lesser degree. You can see glimpses of the snowy shoulder and some of the weirdly biological stone structures hanging overhead, but that's really it. Luckily though, Machna Forest does have something else going for it. Directly above Machna Forest, resting in this alien-like dish, is the Erith Sea. It's more of a lake than a conventional sea, but it's vast and wide enough that the name kind of makes sense in the context of what all these characters know. Whilst exploring the Machna Forest, if you look up to the sky, then you can see the water caustic effects. You can see the water just floating, hovering there, being held in place by probably some magical ether bullshit. And yeah, sure, this makes for a cool, interesting visual, but when you stop and think about it for just a moment, you realise that you're in a rainforest. Above you is a vast pool of water. So the rain from the rainforest is just water that trickles and seeps and falls down from the Aerith Sea above. And this is never explicitly told to you. You just have to figure this out for yourself. Maybe I'm just making wild assumptions and speculation, and the creators of Xenoblade never considered this once. But it makes too much sense. And it's just such a cool little detail. They didn't have to be this way. They could have just slapped a rainforest back here and I'd have just been thrilled. But no, there's that extra level of detail that's so subtle. And I just love this shit. And the sea itself is this vibrant lake with colourful islands and shores in and around and hovering above it. If you get high enough, then you can see the horn of the Bionis head in the distance. That presence that's been looming over you all this time is now ever so slightly below you, and yet its size, its scale is still haunting, because you are still bound by its presence. You still cannot leave it. It doesn't matter where you go, because there is nowhere else to go. These eternally warring corpses are all that this world knows. It's all that this world is, and yet the team at Monolith Soft were able to bring such beauty to it. From the end of these lives comes the birth of countless more, an eternal cycle of life able to thrive despite the bizarre circumstances of its creation. I do have my issues with Xenoblade Chronicles world design. There are a lot of areas, mostly around the back of the Bionis, where you just feel very disconnected from the scale and perspective of the rest of the world. There's also the fact that towns and settlements generally just feel very insignificant. They don't really factor much into the plot or the gameplay, and there aren't really a lot of them. In fact, it feels like several areas from the game were cut quite late into development. Probably because they were. But its whole concept is just so jaw-dropping. The fact that the team at Monolith Soft were able to execute this idea as well as they did is incredible. Now, for future entries in the series, they did play around a bit more with the idea of living on these giant titans to varying degrees of success, but this is the version that stuck with me the most. There is a reason it is my favourite game of all time. There are a number of reasons why it is my favourite game of all time, and this is just one of them. And I'll probably one day make a much more in-depth video on the Xenoblade series as a whole, but lately I just felt like appreciating this aspect of it. It's not the best game world I've ever experienced, but it stuck with me so much. And I hope that this video helps other people to appreciate it as well.